On the phone right now, State Senator Eric Berthel is joining us. Senator Berthel has been, recently won re-election, and as they are now reassigning or maybe newly assigning committee chairs and committee members, Senator Berthel is joining us to talk about what jobs he will be doing in the upcoming legislative session. Senator Berthel, welcome to Talk of the Town.
Hi, Steve. How are you?
I am doing fine, sir. How about yourself?
I'm great, thank you. And I think this is a great use of technology today, too. We're doing some cool things. So thank you, as always, for having me on as a regular guest on your show, and for the opportunity to provide some updates. And yes, we are at that point in time in the legislative cycle as we address returning members and newly elected members to the General Assembly of within each of the various caucuses of doing our committee assignments. So as you already know, and many of your listeners know, I am going back for my third term in the Senate, my fourth term overall in the General Assembly. So Steve, I've had the opportunity to kind of try on some different hats and socks and gloves and whatnot with respect to committee work, and I'm very proud to share that I am back as the ranking member on the Education Committee. Education Committee in the General Assembly deals with all public school education from grades K through 12. That's something that's been a passion of mine for a lot of years. I served on the Board of Ed here in Watertown almost a decade ago. I have a master's degree in education. I taught high school for a very short period of time a long time ago. So it's something that's remained important to me. And I can tell you that, not to get into the minutia and the weeds on it, but the same people that I worked with in leadership, my Democrat colleagues and my House Republican colleague, are back on the committee again. We were all reelected, and we will all be sitting in the same seats that we sat in with respect to our leadership roles. And the reason why I share that is because that committee, and there are others that I'll talk about in just a moment, but that committee actually did some really great work in the last two cycles that I've been on it. We're always going to have partisanship, of course, but I would argue that the Education Committee has been able to remain very centered in terms of its policy and where it has gone with issues. And I think that's a testament to good relationships and people who are really committed to doing what's right, as opposed to necessarily pushing agendas. And that's important because I would argue that the education of our children is probably one of the most important, if not the most important, responsibilities of the government. We talk about everything else that we do, but the children are the future, and if we don't do this right and we don't do it effectively, we're really screwing things up for a long time, because these kids are our responsibility to educate right, and they are the next generation of leaders. So other committees, Steve, ranking on the Banks Committee, again, which is a little less high profile, but still very important. There's a lot of things that are consumer related that come out of that committee. And I'm ranking for the first time on the Human Services Committee, which basically oversees the operation of the Department of Social Services, Department of Developmental Services. Lots of money is spent through this committee, again, providing some very important services to the people of our state. And lastly, I am a member, again, very proudly, of the Veterans Affairs Committee. We have one of the largest concentrations of veterans in this part of Connecticut than anywhere else in the state. I don't know why that's statistically true, but it is. And serving on the Veterans Affairs Committee, something that's very important, making sure that we're doing right by those men and women who served for us in the protection of freedom and everything that we hold so near and dear as Americans. So that's kind of the going full circle on the committees.
Well, I want to get back. We'll kick off with the Education Committee. Obviously, it's been a very challenging year, and in the meantime, you've not been able to meet due to the government being shut down. I assume you are planning on having a regular legislative session, as would be normal in normal times this year.
Yeah. So we will continue to be subject to executive orders by the governor in terms of how we can meet and the process by which we do that. But the legislature has a constitutional obligation to conduct its business, and the governor does not really have the ability to prevent us from doing that. So I think that my understanding at this point is that we will conduct certain types of business using virtual technology like Zoom or whatever it may be. Committee meetings generally can be held that way. Public hearings can be held that way. I'm not certain how we will address the issue of voting because, as I understand it, voting has to be done in person. So that may mean that we can conduct these meetings virtually, but then we'll have to drive to Hartford and actually go and cast a vote. But again, I don't know that, at least to my knowledge, I have not seen how that has been all specifically ironed out. With respect to actual session days, we did that. We did that during the summer. We did that in July, and then we did it again in September. It was a little odd because we were not allowed, at least in the Senate chamber, to all be in the chamber at the same time. The House allowed a certain number of people in. I think we did as well. It's very, very limited, but it certainly will not be, by any stretch of the imagination, with all 36 senators sitting around the Senate circle when we open in January. I just don't see that will not happen right now, unless something dramatic changes between now and opening day on January 6th. I don't see how the governor will allow that, and how anyone will feel that is necessarily safe, regardless of what you believe or don't believe about everything that's going on here.
So you mentioned, as we started this conversation, about technology and all the wonderful things we can do with technology, and we've seen a lot of different organizations embrace this technology throughout the last year. Some still even planning on continuing this sort of arrangement going forward because it's saving them money as far as real estate and things like that. Is there going to be any discussion about potentially changing some of the rules so that you can maybe vote through remote conferencing software?
So yeah, that dialogue is going on as we speak, as I understand it, and I know that and again, not to get too deep into the weeds, but downstairs in the House chamber, they actually have a much newer board that they use for displaying votes and issues. Okay, we call it a tote board, right? And they actually created a mechanism for legislators in the House to be able to vote via their portable device, as long as they were on the secure intranet the secure Wi-Fi within the Capitol complex. So you could not vote from home. You had to still be present, but you did not have to be in the chamber to do that. And the presence was apparently guaranteed because they were on you could only access that voting application via the legislative Wi-Fi, if you will. Mm-hmm. So we do not have the ability to do that in the Senate as of today. And there's some of us, myself included, that still believe that voting in person is, and actually physically being seen, pressing the button, walking into the chamber is an important part of the process. And this, we could go off probably for an hour and talk about, absentee ballots and all of the angst that has been caused and ongoing at this point regarding validity and security of that process. So to me, I'm okay with going back to Hartford and into the chamber. Wearing a mask is not that hard to do, walking in and out of the chamber and keeping our distance. If we believe all of this works and it's keeping us healthy, I think we can follow those protocols. But I do not want to see us get to a point where we could vote, where I could sit in Watertown and vote on issues in the chamber. That is not my doing my job as a legislator. We need to be present in the building for certain aspects of what we're supposed to be doing.
As a ranking member of the Education Committee, obviously this year has exposed quite a bit of problems and weaknesses when it came to moving to online education. Some of these problems we're still dealing with as we go back to distance learning. Mainly things like attendance, more students. I've been reading a lot of studies that the number of students that have been failing their classes has been going up. It's a challenge for educators in every city and town in the state of Connecticut. Waterbury not certainly immune from it as well. Neither is Watertown. Has there been any conversation prior to going into these committees about how we're going to address these problems?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Steve. Thank you. And here's what I can tell you is that committee assignments for leadership and general membership on committees has literally just been completed in the last 24 to 48 hours. So I can tell you just before I got on the phone with you, I got a text message from my Democrat colleagues, the chairs of the House chair, and who is Bobby Sanchez, and the Senate chair, which is my good friend Doug McCrory from Hartford, that they want to get together. And the four of us with Representative McCarthy, who is Kathleen, who is the House ranking member, Republican ranking member. And I think that that conversation is going to focus on, particular to the Education Committee, on addressing the issues surrounding COVID. And I hope that we will put aside in this session, and I will make every effort to do this, put aside some of the non-necessary, wonky agenda items that seem to come up every year. We have an issue that we have to address right now, and that is returning to normal at some point, whatever that's going to look like, addressing the social and emotional learning needs of children, making sure that we get children back on track. You're absolutely right that we've seen an increase of failures and decreased performance of students in these virtual environments. We use standardized testing for better or worse to measure where a student is at the end of a school year. Where do we go with things like that? How do we ensure, again, to my point about why I'm so proud to be on the Education Committee, how do we ensure after a year, 18 months of this COVID world that we live in, let's say, by the time we're out, that we've actually done right and done what we should have been doing for preparing this next generation of leaders? That should be our primary focus. That should be what we are hyper-focused on. Let's get things back on track. Let's make good assessments of what we need to correct and bring our students back up to speed. And this is not, let's just be clear on one other thing, Steve. This is not unique to Connecticut. This is something that's happening all over the United States, and for that matter, all over the world, where there's been this dramatic change in public school education for K through 12, for kids under the age of 18, so to speak. And that I hope, and I will make an effort to make sure that this is our priority for the Education Committee. We have to reset, and we have to make sure that we're doing everything we can for these kids coming out of this, and as we work through the rest of it, however long that's going to be. That should be the priority of this committee.
Well, I think it's going to be very interesting because the curriculum is probably going to have to change dramatically, because now we're not just talking about, annually building upon the previous year's skills. You've had a lot of students that have actually, slid backwards that we're going to have to account for, and we're going to have to sort of figure out a way to not only get them caught up, but to get them caught up while they're moving forward with the rest of the students in their classes.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's going to go back to my comment about assessments and understanding where children are, and that's going to take a lot of brain power. That's going to take a lot of input from lots of constituencies here, and whether it's superintendents, curriculum leaders, teachers, the unions that are involved, very heavily in the education of our students across the state of Connecticut. We're going to have to be able to come into a room and, figuratively speaking, to come into a room and figure out what really needs to be done here, and to make sure, again, that we're addressing truly what has happened and how do we fix it going forward. And I don't want to lose sight of, because I haven't talked about this at all in the last few minutes, but we also want to make sure that our school environments are as safe as they need to be. Okay, and stop with the, right now there's a big push across the nation, and in New York, they're going to shut down schools completely, and Governor Cuomo is going to fire any teacher who doesn't get a vaccine. I think we need to stop with all that craziness, and we need to let what Governor Lamont has done. We need to let the individual school systems and the regional districts and what have you determine what is the best application of science, okay, in terms of safety within each of these school districts. We don't need a statewide mandate. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution that every school should be closed because we need to protect every single teacher. We have very smart people that run our school systems. We have leaders with bargaining units, with unions within these school systems. I think we should rely upon some more localized, as the governor has allowed. Okay, as we rolled into the new school year in September, let's let the local school districts determine what really is going to work best for their staffs, their faculty, and for their students in terms of being safe. And I think that we've seen that has generally worked pretty well so far. And I would hate to see us go back to some overarching mandate where everything gets closed because we're fearful of any potential exposure. Local governance is always going to be better than big government governance. And again, I think that we can rely on advice from the Department of Education. We can rely on advice from the Department of Public Health, CDC, in terms of safety. And the same thing is going to apply to a certain degree, again, Steve, with curriculum and addressing the needs of students individually in these school systems. Because some school systems may have done a better job or worse job in keeping their students on track. So it's really going to be incumbent upon local leadership and relying upon the leaders in these school districts to begin to figure all of this out. And the Education Committee will help with that, as we always do, in terms of providing good policy and direction.
Now, I'm not asking you to speak as for Post University here, but you are employed by Post University, and Post has been very successful in providing an online option for education. And so I imagine, as a member of the Post family, you have obviously frontline experience in how all of this stuff can go right. Are you bringing that to the table during these conversations?
Well, look, I'll add to that. Thank you for that. And yes, I actually also teach part-time at Post as well. I do teach an English class there. So I have had, not only do I have experience and understanding of what Post has done from the business side of it, but I'm actually living and breathing it. And I think the university itself is continuing to learn because, as you may or may not be aware, our main campus does have 1,000 students or so at any given time, and that was completely shut down and remains shut down. So all of those in-person classes went to a virtual environment, which is the one that I'm teaching in addition to the 14,000 or so students that we serve in an online environment, which doesn't involve going to a classroom at all. It's all online. So yeah, I definitely think that I can impart some of what I have learned and actually lived through at Post University into my thinking and participation in what we'll be looking at for the Education Committee. The university is not immune to seeing changes in how our students feel about being in a virtual environment versus in a brick and mortar classroom on Country Club Road in Waterbury. And the university is learning from that as well. But yes, I absolutely hope to bring some of that experience to the table when we're talking about issues in the Education Committee. It's all good stuff. And, for better or worse, when I say good stuff, it's good knowledge. It isn't necessarily the best outcomes in any of it, but it's a learning experience for all of us. This is all completely new, and if we ever have to live through something like this again, hopefully we've learned enough to be better prepared for it and able to respond appropriately and intelligently.
mentioned many times, hopefully we are taking copious notes during this so we know what not to do again, what to do, what can be done differently, and ideally learn from everything that we've experienced in the last year. I want to switch gears with you real briefly here, Senator. I was talking earlier about an article that was published in the Republican American yesterday by Paul Hughes that breaks down kind of exactly where the state is regarding its fiscal mess, for lack of a better term. I mean, we were already facing a couple of tough years when it comes to budgeting and deficits and things like that. And in the wake of 3 massive tax increases over the last decade, it sounds like the governor was somehow going to try to find a way to address those problems without increasing taxes. I don't see how that's even possible. But it is a reality that you are going to have to face when you get back into session. That constitutionally, you have to balance this budget. How do you see that happening?
Well, that's the most difficult question to be asked and answered. I can tell you that, we're fortunate at the moment that we have a very, very healthy, as you and I have discussed in the past, we have a very healthy and large balance in the rainy day fund. I know the governor is speaking about relying upon some federal monies that will come to Connecticut, large amounts of federal, CARES money. The big question remains, Steve, and I do not know the answer as I sit here talking to you today about this. I do not know how we will actually spend or apply that money. For me, I think that we need to address the impact we've had on small businesses. Small businesses are the economic engine of Connecticut. They make up, more than 75% of our economy. We need to get those businesses back to work so that we can have an economy again. That's working and moving and creating jobs and keeping people employed. What I don't want to see us do is spend this money on things that will not help us to improve our economy. And we've talked about in the past some of the crazy ideas that were being floated earlier this year as we approach the election with possible tax increases. As you said, the governor has said he does not want to raise taxes. We know we fill in a hole every year in this budget. So if we don't raise taxes, yet we continue to spend more than we bring in, then how do we fix it? So we have to, if the governor is suggesting maybe that he doesn't want to raise taxes, then we have to cut spending. Okay? And we have to take these funds that are available, rainy day and CARES money, and invest it back in the state in terms of our restarting our economy and getting us back to a point where the state is actually generating appropriate levels of revenue to cover what should be the real cost of the government and running the government, as opposed to what we've done year after year after year, which is spending more than we bring in and finding new ways to tax us. We're at a tipping point in Connecticut. We've been there for a while with respect to, it's not just the billionaires and the millionaires leaving. You're seeing middle class are looking to get out of Connecticut as well because they're not able to afford everything that we throw at them. And this is not new. This is something I talked about in January and February before the coronavirus and COVID was upon us, that we were already in a precarious situation, in our fiscal situation in Connecticut. So it'll be very interesting to see what we make a priority. We're going to fight for protecting the economy and getting the economy back on track. That's what we do every year, and not increasing taxes and reducing spending. That's been it's been what we've waved the flag on and what we stood on the soapbox on for years in Connecticut. Let's see how effective we are, and let's see how many of our colleagues on the other side see that same vision, that we can't just keep taxing people. It doesn't work. It does not work.
This needs to get out there that, as we continue to tax people more and more and more, it has not worked. We have to find a different road. We have to find a different pathway
exactly
here,
right.
because it has not worked. We've been getting worse and worse and worse as time has gone on. And now, because of this pandemic, it has really exposed a lot of the weaknesses in our economy, to the point where many businesses who have been holding on throughout this whole thing, waiting to see what the next day was going to bring, are now starting to think, you know what? I've got to make a decision. And some of those decisions are rather detrimental to our economy. They're deciding to close up permanently. They're deciding to move their businesses elsewhere. You can only hold on for just so long until you have to finally get down to brass tacks and say, okay, what does my future hold, and is my future here in Connecticut? And a lot of businesses and a lot of people are starting to question whether that's the case.
Yeah, Stephen, one of the most disturbing articles that I just saw a couple of days ago was with respect to the restaurant industry. We've seen more than 600 restaurants close in Connecticut, and close for good. They're gone. When people say, "Oh, well, restaurants come and go and whatever," but you have to look at the effect of that. The secondary and tertiary effect of the closing of a restaurant. So the primary effect is people have lost their jobs. Someone who had a business and invested in that business has closed it and probably lost their shirt in the process. But now local suppliers of food items and other things to those restaurants, they're no longer providing that. You look at farms and whatnot that might be providing things to a restaurant locally. They're no longer selling those items to those restaurants. You have restaurants that have drawn people into a certain town or a community or a village in Connecticut. The restaurant's gone. People aren't coming there anymore. So now you have stores, the tertiary effect, that if someone walked down a main street in a town to go visit a couple of stores before they had dinner, they're not doing that anymore. And the restaurants have taken the biggest hit because of, look, I get it. In terms of the safety and, if we believe all this science and everything, that they couldn't be open. In the governor's eyes, they couldn't be open, and that was where people were getting infected and getting sick, were in restaurants. But at some point, we have to make a decision as to how these restaurants get to be reopened during the cold weather months, which are here. Okay? And if they're not open, what are we doing, if anything? What can we do to help these people who have, as you just said, have spent 6, 8, 9 months depleting any reserves they might have had, trying to figure out how to stay in business, and now they're on the verge of saying, I have to close. I don't have any more money. I can't do this anymore. So that's unfortunate, because restaurants are also a big part of the economy in Connecticut, and they drive other parts of the economy in Connecticut. So then that's
Senator
one
Berthel,
example.
I got to cut you off here because we're out of time, but I want to thank you very much, as always, for your time, and good luck in the upcoming session. It's probably going to be,
Thanks,
I would
Steve.
imagine, one of the more challenging ones that you've experienced. So keep in touch with us. Let us know how things are going, all right?
All right. Thanks a lot. Have a great weekend.
Happy holidays, sir.
You too. Thank you. 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 You too.